my name's Kylie Flament. I'm the General Manager of Green Connect, a social enterprise that employs young people and former refugees to do environmental work. I'm also a mum and a wife and a friend and a volunteer in my local community. I grew up in New Zealand on a small farm just outside of Hamilton in the North Island. Had an amazing childhood, growing up with chickens and sheep and jumping over the fence to go to school. I also grew up in a really interesting time when my grandmother had always sewn all of her kids' clothes and grown all of their food. My mum had turned away from that and was more in the sort of mainstream disposable society, and so I grew up with junk food and plastic and single-use items, and reflect on that now and how perhaps that was a blip in human history where we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't know how much harm some of that single-use plastic was causing. We didn't know how much harm fossil fuels were doing. And now we're waking up to those effects. And I find myself in a really unique situation where I'm now working in an enterprise to try and undo some of that damage. I went to high school in Hamilton as well, and I went to university in Dunedin in New Zealand, and then took an exchange year in France where I fell in love with a Frenchman and never quite made it home to New Zealand. And we now call Wollongong home. I think there's a few lessons that I wanted to share from my time that got me to this point, and hopefully they resonate with some of you in the audience, and take from it what you will. I followed my heart a few times. I followed a lot of advice my whole life. But sometimes something didn't sit right with me. So, for example, I got really good grades in high school and all my teachers told me to go and study to be a doctor or a lawyer. And that didn't sit right somehow. I ended up studying business because I wanted to work with people and I wanted to get stuff done in the world and break through new barriers. And so a lot of my teachers were really disappointed in that. But I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't made that decision. The other major life decision I made was for love. I fell in love with a Frenchman, as I said, and I met him a month before I was supposed to go home and finish my double degree in business and psychology. And with 24 hours to go, I cancelled my flight and changed my university degree to stay in France with him. We've now been together for 16 years and have 2 beautiful children, an amazing life on the south coast of New South Wales. And I look back and think if I hadn't made that leap, if I hadn't followed what my heart was telling me to do, my life would have turned out very differently then as well. So sometimes you just know what the right thing to do is, and more in this world and in my role at Green Connect, I'm called on to do what's right and not what's easy. And I think there's a lesson in that for all of us, to always do what's right, not what's easy. The other thing I learned, you may not think it now, but I was usually quite baby-faced, so I always looked really young, and I always was very young in a lot of the roles that I held, including the one that I hold now. I'm 36 years old and I'm the general manager of a fairly large organisation that has won a whole lot of awards and is doing amazing things, and I will talk about that in a moment. But as a woman and as a young woman, I have faced a bit of discrimination along the way. There's still, in this day and age, there are still biases in our society. So if you don't look like, sound like, walk like, talk like the person that you're standing next to, they may treat you differently. It certainly happened to me, and some of those situations have been really shocking and unfortunate. But a lot of the time it's really low-level discrimination. It's people expecting that you can't do as much or be as strong or have as much say as a man or someone who's older or someone who looks and talks like they do. And I've just continued to be me and to turn up and to do the thing. So I think most of the time that's worked. I just keep doing a great job, and eventually they forget that I'm a woman or that I'm young, and they forget that they treated me any differently, because I think when you prove that you can do the thing, all the discrimination, most of the discrimination. There'll still be those few, but don't let your life be dictated by a few people who choose to see bias. Let it be dictated by your actions and what you can achieve. So turn up and keep turning up and acting like you belong, because you do. You have a right to be wherever you are, no matter what gender you are, no matter what colour you are, no matter what language you speak, no matter what age you are. You have a right to be here just like everyone else. Green Connect, as I said, is a social enterprise. If you haven't heard of a social enterprise before, it's basically if a business and a charity had a baby, that would be a social enterprise. So we run businesses, so we sell goods and services to the community and we get income for that. But everything that we do is to do good for the world. So we are both social and environmental. So Green Connect exists to create employment for people who might otherwise not get a job. And in our region, in Wollongong, the Illawarra, that means young people who have lots of barriers to employment, whether it's mental health issues, physical health issues, disability, an unstable home situation, financial woes, whatever it is that's going on for that person. If they're finding it hard to get a job elsewhere, they can come to Green Connect. And also in Wollongong, we have quite a high population of former refugees, and refugees find it really hard, despite wanting to work as soon as they arrive in Australia and wanting to make a life for themselves. They face enormous discrimination, and after 2.5 years of settling in Australia, only a very small percentage, so only 22% of former refugees have a job here. So we work with those groups. So we're about employment. We're also about reducing waste. So we know that we live in a time when, we're creating enormous amounts of waste, and there's this crazy, when you think about it, it is crazy that we dig things out of the ground, oil, we turn them into something like, say, a plastic fork, and then we throw them into a great big hole in the ground where they will never be recovered. It's just absolutely mental, and you might use that plastic spoon or fork or whatever for 20 seconds. Maybe you won't even use it at all. You get given it with your fish and chips and then you just chuck it straight in the bin. That's not sustainable. We cannot live like that forever. And so we're moving to an economy that's more about resources rather than waste. So it's how do we take that plastic and turn it back into something else, and how do we design things better on the front end. And that's super exciting, and Green Connect has been working in that space for 11 years now, so to help businesses and events and schools and also the general community through our op shops to have a zero waste mentality. So nothing that comes into the business is destined for landfill, and nothing goes into landfill from the business, so you're constantly composting, recycling and reusing. And the third space we work in is fair food. So we have a fairly unsustainable food system here in Australia, and it was really put to the test during COVID, when sometimes you couldn't get what you wanted from the supermarket. And we're growing less and less in local communities, and we're making bigger and bigger farms which have bigger and bigger environmental impacts, and we're using pesticides and we're using fertilisers, and we don't need to do that. So Green Connect has a farm. We have an 11-acre farm where we grow fruit and vegetables and herbs and pigs and sheep and chickens and alpacas and bees and goats for the local community. So we sell all of our fruit and veggies in a box. We send out about 180 boxes to local families each week, and we're showing that you can grow food without pesticides and without chemical fertilisers, and you can grow it in your local community. So it's really exciting to be, I guess, at the forefront of climate action. And when you understand some of the problems that our world is facing when it comes to climate change, it can be really, really scary. I've had moments where I'm scared and anxious, and that's normal. I think what I've learned through the work that we do at Green Connect is that everyone can do something. So do what you can with whatever you have and wherever you are, and know that each little thing is enough. Whatever you can do today is enough. People often call Green Connect hope in action, because we're doing. We're not just saying this might work and this should be how it is, we're doing. And I would say that the antidote to any kind of anxiety around climate is to do. Just do something and surround yourself with other people who are doing things and feel that hope in action. And the final thing I would say, given that it's International Women's Day, is women are the most affected by climate change. Unfortunately, women still make up most of people living in poverty in the world. Women are really dependent on their livelihoods, on resources, for their livelihoods. And that can be really scary as a woman, but women also make most of their household decisions. And so no matter, again, who you are, where you are and what you have, you can make a difference. And if all the women in the world stood up and said, every choice I make for our household is going to be good for people and good for the planet, we now live in a time where that's economically viable as well. So that means it can be good for people, good for the planet, and affordable. Every choice matters, and I wish you all the very best as you go out into the world and make your way and make your decisions. Do what's right, not what's easy. Act, do something wherever you are with whatever you have, and surround yourself with other people who are doing something too. And I wish you a life full of hope and climate action. Thank you.